Okay.
Yep, we're all on now.
Yeah. So as you said, Wally, there was a comment last week about fear, and fear as a performance enhancer, I think, was the thing that triggered my attention. I work a lot. I mean, I've been doing this as with a lot of you guys for, over 40 years. And I think fear is, as I tell my clients, fear is the great limiter. And I think that the dimensions that I see, I always ask clients, I say, fear is the great limiter. What is the opposite of fear? And often they say confidence, which is not a bad answer. But I say, to me, the opposite of fear is love. These are the core human emotions, love and fear. And when somebody is performing with love, they're expansive, they're moving into the situation, they're excited about it, they're going for it. When they're performing with fear, they're a little more tentative, they're a little tighter, a little less. Now, it varies. I mean, we could say, in a way, that a degree of fear is what stimulates some people to train hard because they don't want to be caught out. I mean, they're a little bit anxious about not being properly prepared. So in that sense, there is some motivation. But what is really, in my mind, going to sustain them through the training to become exceptional or to become the best they can be is love. It's their passion for the game. It's their passion for the challenge. I mean, I always tell my clients that, if they're playing hockey, you've chosen something very challenging, physically, mentally, it's very challenging. You have to make quick decisions. You have to be brave. Physically, you have to be strong. You have to have endurance. You have to be fast. It's very challenging. Either you love the challenge and you embrace it and you move into it, or you fear the challenge and you're cautious. So I see fear as one of the great limiters. Now, different personalities are different. They have a different tolerance for fear. For example, I think if you compare introverts and extroverts, if there's uncertainty, extroverts move into the uncertainty. If there's uncertainty, introverts stay back a little bit from the uncertainty. So if we talk about uncertainty as a degree of fear or anxiety, again, we see different people, different athletes, different people react to fear differently. But I think one of the things to really understand is how can we help athletes, how can we help our players transform fear into love? What do you do? I say to my clients, what can you do if you're feeling super anxious to change that feeling? And to me, it comes down to working with them to create the right focus, the right feeling, and the right attitude. And by the right focus, I'm working with them always to talk positively to themselves. And, it's one of the simplest exercises I give athletes is to get up in the morning, you're brushing your teeth, you look in the mirror, you make eye contact, and you say to yourself, I'm a good player. And you list 2 or 3 of the reasons why you're good. And if you're becoming a good player, you're saying that, I'm becoming a good player. I'm becoming a better player. It's talking to yourself in a positive way. And, one of the examples I give, every year I have maybe 3, 4 guys who get invited to NHL camp for the first time. And some of them walk into camp and they start looking around and they go like, wow, that guy's big and that guy's fast and he's the number 1 pick. And I say, as soon as you do that, you give your power away. Why were you invited? You were invited because you're a good player. People, an antidote to being anxious is knowing who you are, knowing your strength. And in a way, fear is a separation from your real sense of self. And I'm not sure about myself, I'm become fearful. So talking to yourself in a positive way, visualizing yourself performing well, seeing yourself doing the things you do, working with visualization, working with mental rehearsal, seeing yourself playing well. And then I think probably the key technique that I have working with clients relates to breathing. Just working with clients on breathing, just getting a nice, smooth breathing rhythm. And again, when we're anxious, when we're fearful, we cut down our breathing. And I do this breathing exercise, and I say to them, very simple, has 3 parts. The first part is just to experience the rhythm of the breath. Nice, smooth breathing rhythm. And then I ask them to put a hand on their chest or to put a hand between their chest and their abdomen. And just notice that as they breathe in, the abdomen, the chest rise and fall. And that the breath is like waves in the ocean. And they can always find the waves, and the waves will help them to be more calm and strong. So you're working with positive thought, you're working with positive imagery, you're working with this breathing exercise. The other thing about breathing is it keeps us in the present. When people worry, which makes them anxious, it's because they're thinking about the future. And when they get frustrated or disappointed, they're thinking about the past. And the easiest way to be in the present is this breath. So working with them to focus on positive self-talk, working with creating good feelings, really helps them to have a little more handle on moderating the intensity of that performance demands. And one of the other things I always ask them, any sport, is to pick an animal that gives you the feelings you'd want to have if you were playing great. And with elite athletes, not little kids, because little kids picked all kinds of crazy animals. But if I'm talking to elite athletes, 98% of them are picking predators. They're picking the big cats, they're picking wolves, they're picking bears, they're picking eagles, they're picking predators. And I say, let's say we're talking about a defenseman. And I say, what's the difference between the defenseman who's a predator and the defenseman who's the prey? And of course, the predator steps on the ice to make something happen, and the prey is like tentative. The prey is careful. I had a guy yesterday, a client of mine in the NHL, and he's a wolf. That's his animal. And he's playing like a deer because he's worried about what the coaches think. He's careful, tentative. He doesn't want to make a mistake. Wolves don't worry about what the coaches think. Hunters, they're hunting the puck. I said to him, if we put a hamburger between you and a wolf, who would get the hamburger? Of course, the wolf. I said, if you're the wolf and there's a puck between you and another guy, it's your puck. If you play like it's your puck, they're not 50-50s, they're 60-40s or 70-30s. So it's working with people to get them out of being too cautious, too tentative, afraid of making a mistake. And again, I think fear is the great limiter. And it's really, as I said earlier, fear represents a separation from my true self. Because when I'm feeling good about my true self, I step into the situation and perform. So those are some simple off-the-top ideas, and I'd love to hear comments or response to that. Wally, I don't hear you.
Sammy, I'm just going to ask Sammy, Joe, I mean, our sporting world and the sports psych work we're familiar with related to men and men's sports. What Saul has talked about in your experience with your daughters working with professional women's hockey and fear, and what Saul said, does it connect with your needs and those issues on the female side?
Well, hi, Doctor. Good to see you again. I really connect with what you have to say because I think I was that athlete, and I was that athlete that wanted that and had that drive. And, I've heard you speak numerous times. Now working in minor hockey and having kids that don't necessarily have that drive. I have a daughter who's happy and joyous and loves playing at the park, but isn't necessarily the one that wants to be first to the puck or wants to be first to anything. And the majority, I would say half of the kids that I coach at the house league level are kind of like that. You know, you just want to like give them joy and give them that first entry into sport in general, whatever sport that is. And teaching that ability to want it. That's where I struggle, because I'm not sure, like my daughter says, why do you always want to be first, mommy? And I said, I don't know. Maybe there's something wrong with me. I don't, maybe it's me. Maybe it's not them. You know, maybe it is simply about moving your body and having this joy that comes with sport. And so, yeah, I guess that's not necessarily a question. It's, you know, a statement for all of those others that don't want to be the best and not being okay. And how do we come to terms with that?
Well, wait a sec. I mean, I'm not saying, my job isn't really to motivate people, though I do that.
You certainly do that.
My job is really to help people perform at their best, and I think to perform without fear. So if I'm talking to a group of house league athletes, it's harder to get messages across than it is if I'm talking to a team in the Western Hockey League. Because,
right, so that's the most of the kids I coach now, and they don't have the same mentality as me. So do you have any suggestions, I guess?
Yeah, the thing I think we want to be telling them is to enjoy playing and to enjoy themselves. And that's why, again, I say, are you a good player? Are you becoming a good player? I like to play. Give them some 3 or 4 thoughts, or encourage them to create 3 or 4 positive thoughts about themselves or about playing the game, and work with the breathing stuff is perfect. You know, some of these kids come out and they're a little bit tentative. Just breathe, you know, feel energy coming in and flowing through you. I mean, I think fear is what was really the subject here. Fear is the great limiter, whether it's kids just playing pond hockey or if it's guys playing in the NHL. So how do we alleviate that? Again, positive self-talk, saying to themselves, and really helping them to create good feelings. When they are frightened, it's like they are disconnected from their true self. So I sometimes say to athletes, you know, when I have them look in the mirror every day and say, I'm a good player, and these are elite players I'm working with most of the time. But even with them, sometimes I say, are you a good person? And most of them say, yeah. And I say, why are you a good person? And the number one thing they always say is, because I'm nice to people. I say, good, okay, what else? And they say, that's the first one that gets stuck. I said, do you work hard at things that are important to you? And they say, yeah. Are you honest most of the time? Yeah. I say, okay, maybe every 2 weeks, look in the mirror, make eye contact and say, I'm a good person. You know, it's learning to talk to yourself in a positive way. So, I mean, I think have some responsibility as coaches to help people feel good about themselves. I even give some athletes, not guys in the NHL, but some athletes, this Louise Hay exercise, where I say, look in the mirror, make eye contact, and say to yourself, in your case, Sammy, you'd look in the mirror and you'd say, Sammy, I love you. I really, really love you. I mean, you know, it's just helping people to feel good about themselves so they can express themselves at whatever they do. And again, fear, you know, not wanting to make a mistake, not wanting to be caught out, not wanting to be not okay, is the great limiter. So learning to talk to yourself in a positive way, to see yourself doing simple things you like to do.
I think that's so incredibly valuable for us as coaches too, to know that we are imparting the information that we need to impart in these children, and that isn't always about that next rep team. It isn't always about them making something or doing something. It's about them as people. And have we encouraged them to bring out their better self, really, at the end of the day?
Yeah, their good self, just like
yeah. So I think we as coaches maybe need to have that positive self-talk with ourselves too, to know that we are doing the right thing.
So
thank you. I appreciate that.
I'd like to interject relative to Sammy's thoughts on kids. They get out there to begin playing fear, and they're playing a sport where it's competitive in time. Initially, they're just learning to skate, learning to play. Now you reach the stage of compete. And I think the biggest fear is contact, falling down, getting hurt, learning how to do that, and cooperative contact in terms of feeling okay about the physicality and control of your body, and actually enjoying contact and making it humorous, celebrating it with children. So there are progressions in contact confidence and tag games and whatnot to develop the skills to overcome the anxiety of their physical confidence in themselves, to be strong enough to go in those situations physically and enjoy them mentally with one another, especially teammates, before you get into competitive games at higher levels where it gets a little Yankee. But I think the right start relative to Saul's talk, I mean, I've seen a great motivational video of a 6-year-old girl standing in front of a mirror talking about herself and believing in herself. And that is what Saul talked about. Now, when they get on the ice or get in a competitive team environment, whether it's one-on-one or whatever, that confidence in self will be even greater with physical literacy, physical competence. But I think the art of coaching at that age is being able to teach, make it comfortable, and make it fun. But there is a point when you go up the competitive ladder where there are lines that are crossed in terms of physicality and safety and intimidation, and fear become a part of that side of the game with young players. And I'm talking here related to the U13s that Tom coached last year and the U15s this year. I mean, I've been shocked at the U13s, the size difference of the girls, and I've had to go to benches to remind them how to check stick on puck, not body, because they don't know how to distinguish the difference. But we've had some serious injuries, stretcher jobs with 15-year-old girls being taken off the ice, games being called off. So it is a serious thing, Saul. And I find girls at that age, Sammy, they don't play with fear. At the competitive so-called that age group, elite hockey, I don't see them throwing snow and being afraid to go in the corner. And Tom could speak to that because he's coaching U15s. He has a small team. And I don't think there's anybody there that's fearful of their environment.
But Wally, those are you're talking the rep kids. Probably the fearful kids are the ones that are left in house league.
Okay. All right.
That's my thought. But
Yep, you're right.
But I think worked with NHL players who were tough guys, and some of the tough guys had some anxiety about fighting. And they were tough guys. I mean, you know, I'm not going to say who they were, or who they are. I'll tell you one, they were not Tiger Williams. The Tiger was not one of them.
that must be tough, because those men are put into environments they don't necessarily even want to be in. That's just how they got to make their living.
Part of them wants to be there, but then you know, they want to play and they want, you know, and they are tough, but they become the league has improved in that regard. I mean, in the old days, it was really, you know, if you were the tough guy on this team. You knew there was a pretty good chance you're going to be fighting that other guy. And but I think even, you know, your rep girls, I mean, I haven't worked really with women's hockey. I worked with the Canadian women's soccer team, our national team, and these are very elite players, and some of them are playing with fear. I mean, they don't want to make a mistake. They don't want to let the team down. It wasn't so much a physical fear. It was just fear of screwing up, you know? And maybe one of the reasons Christine Sinclair was so great was she didn't have fear. She could play in, you know, she could be calm with the ball in a scoring situation. But she was unique in that regard. Or maybe not unique, but she was exemplary.
Exceptional.
Yeah.
Mike Benelli, out there in your environment, can you chime in on some of your thoughts and concerns?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it goes to a lot of stuff we've discussed on here too. That I think this fear, and Saul, maybe you can, you know, maybe add to it based off of your most recent experience. That I think for the youngest kids now that are in this like social media world, that fear even becomes even greater, right? Because like when I was growing up, I didn't know somebody was better than me. I just assumed I was really good, so I had a lot less fear about like being compared to other players. But right now, the kids are comparing themselves to each other daily, like every single day. Even the pros, right? I've worked with a lot of NCAA guys right now, and BCHL kids, and you know, kids that are looking to go pro, and they see, you know, the joke is, hey, if you're not on Instagram weightlifting, you're not weightlifting, right? Or if you're not posting that you're training, you're really not training. And I just don't buy that. I think it's a really hard, I think, mantle to live up to. You know, when you add the piece of fear in there, and you know, and I think to Sammy Joe's point with the youth hockey kids that I work with, you know, it is actually, you know, very, very uplifting to me when I watch the house league kid or the rec kid not having any fear because they're just having fun. Like they have no idea. Like I know my own younger son plays. He has no idea there's AAA hockey. He has no idea there's elite hockey. He doesn't know that 10-year-olds go to Quebec and play hockey from New York. He has no idea. So I think it's like, so I think that adding in the, you know, when a player is unduly educated, I guess, by maybe mom or dad, we add to that fear. Like I don't have to tell my kids there's AAA hockey. They only know that because I'm telling them that. And I think but I think social media and the access to other players, the access to, you know, this, I know down here, you know, we have AAA elite 2014 year bursts, a 2015 year bursts, and 2016 year bursts. I mean, these are legitimate recruitment opportunities for our, you know, for our location. And I think that adds so much fear and anxiety that's just not needed.
Yeah, I can't disagree. As I was using the example before of having a couple of players who, you know, every year go to NHL camp for the first time, and they look around, and when they start comparing themselves to others, it starts to create some problems. And I said, why were you invited? You're invited because you're a good player. Focus on your game. Focus on your strength. Talk positively to yourself. Do the breathing. Create the good feelings in you. You're responsible. But it comes about when I'm worried what the coach is thinking. I'm worried what these people are thinking. And it's a lack of self-love in a way. And I think as coaches, it's interesting, again, because I'm working mostly, well, almost exclusively with elite athletes. And there is a push there to be the best you can be and to excel. So there is a pressure there. And the pressure certainly predisposes some people to more fear. It's different at an earlier development league. And I know when I wrote Hockey Tough, I wanted to include an epilogue about the difference between coaching kids and coaching elite athletes. And the publisher really didn't want it. No, just write the book about, the different elements to be successful. And I said, no, we got to have that, because there are coaches who are coaching 10 and 12-year-olds who think that they're coaching in the NHL. And they put a tremendous amount of pressure on kids, and they destroy the joy that kids have playing. And Bobby Orr made some good comments when I was writing the book about, just how he said, I don't know if I would have become the player I had, something to that effect. If I grew up with that kind of coaching. I just went out on the ice and, it wasn't, I think, Lake Erie or something, wherever he was, and, skated on the ice out there and had fun, and we played for hours and hours, and that's how you develop this great love of the game. Yeah. So, with young kids, we really should be encouraging them that it's great that you're out playing. It's really, let's have some fun. And it's important, because kids will sometimes say things to other kids that cause people not to feel good about themselves. My son was a very good baseball player, and I coached Little League. I coached more than that, but I coached Little League. And we'd have a situation where Joey would be coming up to the plate, and some kid on the bench would say, "Hey, Joey, don't strike out." I'd say, "Wait a minute. Why did you just say that?" And he'd say, "Because I want to get up." And I said, "Well, if you want to get up, you say, 'Hey, Joey, get a hit.' If anybody here says, 'Joey, don't strike out,' they're going to be sitting on the bench. They're going to be out of the game." And in a short time, some of these kids learned a little bit more how to talk to each other. So as coaches, we have that responsibility too, to be able to say, hey, we say good things to each other in the room. If a guy doesn't, maybe he didn't do it, but we say good try. That's for little kids developing a sense of playing with each other. That's not at the highest level.
Mike Benelli.
Yeah, you're just triggering. So when I was laughing, I was coaching with this one dad, and we were trying to help each other a little bit at the with the 10-year-olds, and I'll never forget and watching the kid's face and really understanding this about any kind of human emotion, right? That we had lost the game something like 10-1 on a Saturday, and it was horrible. The kids are crying and everybody's upset. The parents are all quitting the team, the whole thing. And the first thing he does on Sunday, and we were missing like 3 or 4 players. So now on Sunday, we have the 3 or 4 players back. All the 10 players are back in the locker room. He's like, if for nothing else, don't remember how bad the loss was yesterday. Let's not dwell on yesterday's beatdown. And all the kids are like, what happened yesterday? And then the kids start crying again. They're upset. So I'm just laughing how, that just that verbiage and how you go into a room with, well, any person, but for 10 and 11-year-olds that have probably beaten themselves up, for at least the 10 minutes after a game, they've forgotten it. They've forgotten all about that game yesterday.
And that's also really great advice with a partner too.
Right.
Don't say that to your husband or wife either. Don't.
Yeah. You just come in and go, hey, remember yesterday how bad that was? Let's not start there.
How terrible it was.
So, but I laugh about the kid getting up to the plate. It's the same thing. It's like, don't screw up. Oh, okay. Well, why don't you tell me, hey, go out and get a hit, or let's go out and have your best at bat, or hey, help the team out here. Not, oh, I hope you don't fail, because then it's going to be all on you. And my son plays lacrosse goalie in high school, and it's so funny how you can trigger a player's mental state as they're walking into the net just by one sentence that you can make. And hey, I hope you make some good saves here today so we can stay in the game. I'm like, well, thanks a lot. Why don't you score some goals? Crazy.
We had a sports psych that right before the World Championship, as I'm walking off of the warm-up, like to go into the dressing room before the final game, and I'm the starting goalie, and he says to me, are you nervous before the big game today?
I wasn't.
Luckily, I was pretty strong mentally at the time. I kind of looked at him and I said, is that what you're supposed to say right now?
Thanks a lot.
Anyways, I won't use his name.
Ray, I'd like you to introduce yourself to Saul. Ray's in the same business as you on a corporate level, but he has worked with athletes too. And right now he's into the corporate leadership thing. Go ahead, Ray. Introduce yourself to Saul and see where it goes. I do want to get talking about the influence of coaches and parents in terms of their fear, creating it and doing the wrong things or the right things. Go ahead, Ray.
Good morning, Saul.
Morning.
Nice to see you again, Sammy, Mike. Merry Christmas to you guys. I'm 77 years old, so I have a long story behind me. I'm an engineer by profession, turned into a performance coach. And I've worked with mostly elite athletes from the university level to the pros. One of the things that I'd like to share is a story about the university football team at the University of Ottawa. And I've worked with Wally from, like 20 plus years now. So he knows a lot of things that I've lived. But I'd like to tell this story because it illustrates the impact that players or coaches can have between themselves. It was the Vanier Cup 2000. And we were in the Vanier Cup, but our opponent had won the last 4 games on their way to being there by coming back, like from 2-3 touchdowns down. It was like never done before. At halftime, we were leading 35-10. For all of you, I'm sure you know football. That's pretty well, like sign the names on the cup because we're going to win this. At halftime, one of the coaches came into the room and started yelling to the guys, like we're up here 35-10, but remember those guys have been coming back every game that they have won. That was in the semifinals, the finals, the Mitchell Cup out in Maritimes, and one more. Anyways, 4 games that they had won. They had no business being there. They were in 4th place in the West. And he yelled that, like to the top of his lungs. Well, when we went back out, I'll use these words. We were like a bunch of rags. We couldn't stop a run. We couldn't defend a pass. We couldn't rush the quarterback. Excuse my language, because I'm going to say exactly what happened in the 4th quarter. The players, okay, I had been working with these guys, the captains, all year long. At the bench, they said, fuck the coaches. We're going to go and get this game. We intercepted a pass at the 5-yard line. That could have been a touchdown. We blocked a field goal, another 3 points. You know what the final score was? 42-39. We won it. But can you imagine the impact that coach had on the team? It was unbelievable. So it illustrates what you've been talking about, that the talk between the players or between coaches and players has a tremendous impact on the performance. Now, Wally is very familiar with my book that I've written about performance. I'd like to say 2 things, and one is going to lead right where you're going. The first thing is that, having worked with high-level athletes in university and the pros, one of the things that's important is to help them look inside as opposed to looking outside. Like you said, Saul, like players will have a tendency to listen to what's being said or read what's being written more than having faith in their capability. And Wally has been around, and I've worked with him. And if you remember Wally, the ladies or women's team at the University of Ottawa, and how much we worked on a coach to help him change his dialogue. Instead of instilling fear, talking about aspirations as opposed to expectations. And the other thing is about how coaches impact the team by what they tell the team in hockey, in between periods, where I was talking to a pro athlete last week or the week before, and saying, you're like, most of the time they should shut up. You know, we know what we have to do on the ice.
Ray, excuse me, Ray. I would like, because Saul is our guest. He talked to me. What's come up? Like Sammy said, was that a coach that said to you going out on the ice the wrong thing?
Yeah.
Or
Up the ice. Sammy,
okay.
Sammy talked about, you know,
Yeah.
like, you're
Well,
nervous.
Saul-
Are you nervous?
Saul, you talked to me about generations ago, a coach, and the story of that generation and the way they coached back then. But I'm finding today coaches are doing a much better job at this, much better. Some coaches, like, they didn't cause fear. It's stupid that they would do that. I don't know that I've seen or heard any coaches be that wrong today. Back in the day, Saul, it was yell and scream, and fear was the way of coaching back in the day. But I wonder if you could talk about the generation of coaches and maybe anybody else on here. I'm dealing with parents today, and talk about taking away the joy of the game and attacking coaches. It's really a very serious undermining influence on what the good of the game and what sports can do for young people.
Yeah, well, I give a talk sometimes to coaching groups on the biggest mistakes that coaches make. And I list 10 of them. And the first 3 are, and it's changing. I mean, there is growing awareness and people are doing a better job. But the first 3 are, number 1, negative eyes, way too much negativity. And certainly we have to have, as coaches, we want to hold people accountable, but the focus is way too negative. The second one is a lack of emotional control. And again, we're seeing much better handle on that. And the third one is, and well, I think maybe one of the biggest of all is I call it a lack of sensitivity. And by that, I mean, coaches tend to broadcast on a certain band. Again, you know, some are more confrontational, some are more nurturant and supportive, some are more giving you a whole lot of technical input, some are more on the positive emotional side. So a lot of coaches are not aware of their style of communication. If some of you are familiar with the Myers-Briggs, it's a good test, and it looks at four different dimensions: extroversion, introversion, thinking, feeling, and a couple of others. Some coaches are just not aware that they're very confrontational, and they're not aware of who they're talking to. So if you're an extroverted, confrontational style coach, Tortorella type coach, and you're talking to a extroverted kind of individual, you can challenge them and they'll go out and do it. You know, Jeremy Roenick was like that. Tiger Williams was like that. If you're talking to a more sensitive athlete and you're in their face, they shrink from it. It's counterproductive. So this lack of awareness of who you are and who you're talking to, that's a big issue. And again, people are becoming more aware of who they are, and they're becoming more sensitive to who the audience they're talking to. But those are the big three. Lack of preparation. There's a few others, but those are the big three. Being negative, being emotional, and not realizing how you're coming across. And I told Wally the story the other day. I was working with one NHL team. I won't mention Mark Crawford's name. And he was yelling at everybody. I mean, he was yelling at the officials, he was yelling at the other team, and he was yelling on the bench at us. And I was getting feedback from the players saying it's a distraction. There's too much emotion on the bench. So I go to Mark and I said, Mark, I'm getting feedback from both the vets, and I won't throw players under the bus, but I said, but from both the vets and the young guys, that there's too much emotion, too much yelling. So they didn't hire me next year. You know, I mean, that's the downside sometimes of, kill the messenger. But you got to say these things because, mind you, I work with Keaton. I would never say that to Mike. I'd be too afraid of him. But, that's the way it is. That's the way it was. And I think it's changing, but it's still, coaches get fired like that. Players don't get fired. I'm talking at the pro level. And and I guess even in the Western Hockey League, that level of elite amateur, well, it's not amateur exactly. So coaches are anxious. They're anxious. If we're not doing this right, if we're not winning, I'm going to get fired. They're coming from fear, and they project their fear back on the players. And if you take that all the way down to little kids playing, if the parents over-identify with the parent is living his life through the child, and the child isn't playing well, the parent's embarrassed. So the parents coming from fear, and they're the ones who, instead of embracing the kid and saying to him, hey, you're trying hard, you're doing a good job. I know it's not easy, and that they're putting the kid down. And they destroy the kids eventually if you get too much of that. They don't want to play. I got to tell you this story. Again, my son was a very good baseball player. He was a pitcher in college. He was all conference and so on. But when he was 10 years old or 11 years old, we were having a practice, and I was catching. I was a coach, and he was pitching. And one of the little boys who was up was afraid of the ball. So he was kind of stepping away and swinging. And his dad was sitting in the stands. And his dad said, I'll never forget it. His dad yelled at him, your little sister has a better swing than that. And the kid believed his dad. The kid turned to his dad and he said, no, she doesn't. Well, if the father's going to persist like that and say these things, eventually the kid's going to turn to his father and say, fuck you. Can you imagine saying this to a little kid, a bit anxious? And, there are drills, just like Wally was saying, there are drills to help players learn to deal with contact. I know in baseball, sometimes you could put a heavy, like, winter coat on these little kids so that if they got hit with the ball, it didn't hurt them very much, There are things we can do to try and mitigate some of the real concerns that people have about playing. And, I like the drills we used to have where we, dump the puck in the corner. The defenseman who was a Confederate, and we'd say, rough him up a little, get him used to being bumped, but don't crush him, And if you have a couple of more intelligent, cooperative defensemen, you can help them get the forwards a little more accustomed to dealing with the physicality of the game. Because there are, in developmental hockey, minor hockey, there are kids who are afraid of the physical part of the game. And it's going to limit them, especially boys, because, there's more contact. So we've got to make it fun in the development, but we've got to bring more love to the process. And that's, I don't mean this in a soft way. I want players to love the game. I want them to love the challenge, and I want them to love themselves playing the game.
Saul, you talked about doing things to get them comfortable, like wearing a winter coat so the ball wouldn't hurt. Oh, back in the day, working with NHL players, we did shot blocking.
Uh-huh.
And it wasn't a teaching progression. It was just the coaches hammering real pucks at players in shooting lanes, and they were going down and stopping them. Eventually, I think it was about 5 years. We ran the program for 10 years, but 5 years later, we started using tennis balls. And the idea of teaching technique, and I know Hal Turse brought this idea up. The greatest fear of players on his team is getting hit by a puck. Mm-hmm. And they talked about it, desensitizing that fear. But the idea of how do you teach shot blocking, getting in the shooting lane, making yourself big, but not going down so they don't shoot. And I think these are areas of expertise that you acquire over a long time. And I struggle with, I don't struggle with coaches today that I work with. They are doing the right things. They're doing everything you're saying and we're saying. But if they're not winning and their kid isn't doing as well as they think they should, the coach is going to be thrown under the bus. And I'm sort of standing in the highway and stopping the bus before it runs over everybody. Because to me, the parents were coached by a different generation.
Yeah.
And that's the issue, is you've got to grow with a generation of students or athletes. The coaches, the younger coaches, I think, handle these things much better, much more positively. And it's not the way parents are familiar with. Like, shorten the bench. Don't let the 11 or 12-year-old get out in the power play or penalty kill because they're not going to contribute. Well, that's happening. So you're not instilling the love of the game and the confidence that young people need to gain from sport. I call it transmitting belief. And that belief comes from the coaches giving them the opportunity. And it can be totally undermined by parents criticizing those coaches because the outcomes aren't right for the team or the opportunities aren't proper in their mind for their own children. So that's a different kind of fear. And I'm not sure the players experience it as much as I just don't know how to interpret it. I sit back and I shudder because I've been trying to deal with this group of sharks, lifelong learners. We're doing this for the good of the game so that the stuff we're talking about doesn't happen with coaches and with parents. But I wanted to ask the wisest, oldest shark on board here, and he's actually younger than me. Tom Malloy, are you there? Or are you still planning today's practice?
I'm here.
Tom, having heard everything and coached more than anybody at different levels, what's your take on the conversation where it's going relative to your experiences?
Well, we've talked about, a lot of things, that's for sure. But fear of failure, like so I'm going to talk to a player tonight about how she's having a heck of a time scoring. And she's beats up on herself so badly. We were, even our last game, the other team had the goalie pulled. She had the empty net and she missed the net. Like it was unbelievable. And last night she missed the net once and she laid down on her back with her arms spread like in a, you know, because she's so down on herself. So, you know, I'll ask you guys, what would you say to her? You know, and that's you know, the kind of thing you deal. Everybody's a little bit different, and like Wally talks about the parents. I know that one team is really having trouble with the parents. So, you know, I guess the situations are just team to team, and they kind of stay the same. There's always some negative and some positive. I'll give you an example. When I coached my son's team through Bantam and Midget, so we won for 2 years, and then we get in first year Midget, and there were kids that had played together forever, and they went to the league executive saying, "Oh, he can't cut any of these kids because blah blah blah," and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, the parents were so negative on that team that we couldn't really do anything, and we got eliminated first round playoffs, and then the next year we won the provincials again. So all of those situations, how parents can affect things, and you know, I guess I'm jumping all over the place, but what would you do to talk to this player tonight? You know, that want to get her kind of stop beating herself up.
Saul, go ahead.
I would get her out on the ice and I would have her just shooting pucks into the open net. Just, yeah, you can do that. Look, you can do this. Let's see you do it again. You just did it again. Do it again. Do it again. Do it again. Do it again. One of the problems is this graph, everybody's seen it. It's the relationship between performance and emotional intensity. So we see with no intensity, performance is very low. This is performance. This is maximum performance. So as intensity increases, now we're in a good zone. Now we're hitting the net every time. Now we're trying too hard. There's more emotional intensity. Performance drops off. At the elite level, this is where I'm dealing with people all the time. So getting them to be a little more relaxed is really helpful. Have a little more control of their emotional intensity, but just get her out on the ice shooting pucks, you know, before practice or after practice by herself. Okay, you know, get her 5 feet away, bang, in the net, in the net, in the net, in the net. Obviously, you can do this. Get her 10 feet away, get her 15 feet away, and there's no pressure on her, and she's doing it. So you say, so you can do it. It's pretty obvious you can do it. The only thing is sometimes you try too hard. Take a breath. Know that you can do this. Be thinking, yes, I can. Yes, I can. That's a thought for tonight. Yes, I can. Simple stuff. Repetition in a relaxed state, and the apprehension goes away. There may be a, yeah, but, no. Let's just practice this and it will go away. You're a good player. You know, that's what I would do.
All right, I'll try that.
Yeah.
I'm not demonstrate. I might miss a net.
But, yeah.
Saul, years ago, my first year university sports psych. I'm not sure where you were then, but it was 1967, 68. And we had a sports psych class, and he handed out a sheet that was put together by Dr. Vanek from the Czech Republic. And I believe that he was one of the original founders of sports psychology. And it was an autogenic training sheet, like you talked about this at the beginning, about breathing, relaxing, tightening muscles, and visualizing yourself doing well. I've used that sheet with every team I've ever coached and memorized it so that I can adjust the script to suit the needs of the group maturity of the group and the environment that we're in, and with great success, changing their feeling state through this little exercise of relaxing, tensing muscles, laying down, yoga breathing, and visualizing. And it's had pretty good effects immediately, like the next day. Now, at the young age Tom is at, I don't think I would be experimenting with autogenic training. But the idea is the same. Change the mindset, change the way they feel, whatever you can do. And I'm going to share one story, Ray, and I'll go back to you because you had your hand up before. Bob Johnson, when he was keeping stats, coaching the Calgary Flames, they posted plus and minus stats. And he said he saw Lanny go and look at his stat, and the expression on his face, he never did it again. He was so deflated. That stat, negative stat of him not being on the plus side, he never did it again. And I think the use of negative stats, trying to learn from negative performance, pointing out mistakes versus generalizing them to the whole team and saying we've got to get better at this overall, not just pointing out to one individual. These are things coaches are learning to do. And don't use the word don't, pardon me. That's one of the biggest things of all. And it's the story I've been given by a Hockey Alberta seminar years ago. Was a general manager in the ninth inning with a full count goes out on the bench to talk to the quarterback. And whatever you do, he says, don't throw it high and wide. Well, of
Warren
course,
Spahn.
that's where he throws it, and
That's
it's out of the
story
park.
Warren Spahn.
So Morris Lukovich has talked about that, Saul, and he probably got it from you in his languaging. Over time, he picked up on it, has turned it into something he does with corporations. The idea of languaging, not using buts and not using don'ts. It's an art, and we learn that as coaches. And coaches are doing this much, Saul, and parents don't appreciate how much coaches dedicating to giving their time, how tuned in they are, how dedicated they are to doing the right things in the best interest of their kids. I have nobody coaching for their own ego, for their fame. And yeah, they want results, and we feel better when you win and if somebody goes on. But in the end, they're coaching for the right reason. And I just want the community, the parents, to appreciate them more. That's all. Ray, go ahead. We might have changed your train of thought by now.
Nope. I wanted to build on Saul's suggestion to Tom. Great suggestion, because now it links the physical and the mental, going out and shooting pucks at the net. I've how should I say, promoted that forever. But I would like to add something, Tom. First of all, I'd like to ask the question, how old is this girl?
She's 14.
Well, I've worked with athletes that are younger than that, so she's old enough. And I'd like to think you can do that. Suggest to her that she sits down in a quiet place and, like Wally just talked about, like get into a relaxed, Saul has been talking about breathing, get into a relaxed state and then visualize herself on breakaways. Visualize herself on, taking the position where she likes to be and getting the pass and shooting it in the net. And one of the things that Wayne Gretzky was great at And, like his quote is still good, is shoot where the goalie isn't. Because what I found a lot in the women's hockey, I worked with the University of Ottawa's team for many years, is they tended to shoot at the goalie instead of shooting in the open space. Don't ask me why, or don't tell me, like, this is weird, but that's the way it is. They shoot at the goalie. When they start shooting at the open space, they score about 50% more. So to build on what has been talked about, that girl can be helped by doing the on-ice thing, but also suggesting to her that she just visualize herself doing good, like putting that puck in the net, whether the goalie's there or not, and it will tremendously improve her performance.
Ray, I'm going to throw at you your line, right stuff, right amount, right time. I think what Saul said is the right stuff and the right time. The autogenic part, the visualization part, is going to come in time. Shooting at an empty net, a big target, lots of space. Over time, you can hang pylons or bells in the top corners or halfway down. But right now, the mindset and how she feels about herself, that can come from that exercise of you doing that and reminding her, just telling her to see herself scoring. Imagine yourself scoring, because you can score. And Saul, I think you began with this idea. The very first thing you said, I think it's worth repeating now. Begin to love yourself again. But when you began the presentation, you said, look in the mirror, and what do you say?
I'm a good player. I mean, I said three different things. You look in the mirror and you say, I'm a good player, or I'm becoming a good player, and you know 2 or 3 reasons why. I also said you can look in the mirror and say periodically, once in a blue moon, and say to yourself, I'm a good person, and know why. And then I said the third thing was you can look in the mirror and make eye contact and say, I love you, which is a very simple Louise A exercise. Now, I don't know if I can get guys in the NHL to be doing that exercise, but a funny story, what you were saying, Wally, earlier about, I think you can give people negative feedback in a learning way. But you have to be careful. I think the positives should be 2 to 1 to the negatives. And I was used to work with the Predators, and Mitch Korn was the goalie coach. And Mitch has a lot of ideas. He's a very, creative guy. And we were talking about the use of video for goalies. And we were in the dressing room, and he was saying, I like the goalies to watch the goals that are scored on them. They can really learn something from that. And then he left the room, and Anders Lindback was the backup goalie for the Preds at that time. And Lindback turned to me and he said, I like to watch the saves. And we started laughing, It's both. It's seeing both, but it's not just focusing on the negatives. But you do have to show somebody sometimes if you were tighter on the post, if you didn't drop your hand, what have you, so that they can learn from that. But also be showing them the good stuff that they're doing, the rebound control and the, positioning and hands up and whatever the positives are.
Oh, can I get Sammy to comment? Because she was one of those people. Sammy, go ahead. Everything we've said.
I was one of those people. You mean goalies?
The goalie. Yeah.
Goalies are people too, Sammy.
Goalies are people too. That's what we've been told.
The target.
Well, why did they call it a 2-on-0?
Right. We're non-existent. No, Dr. Saul, I like the idea of I liked watching how goals were scored too. And I liked watching saves. But we're also in an era unlike what now, where we can deconstruct so much of the play in video and the minutia, slow it down. You know, Wally, when I saw you at the summer goaltending clinic out in Calgary that we were doing, I mean, the amount of breakdown we were doing to really every split second of every play and what the goalie's doing and how they're tracking, and you can see all of that now. We certainly did not have that in my era. So I would say that for me, a lot of it was textbook learning. You know, like we didn't even necessarily have video to look at. We could see like a snapshot of another goalie in a certain position. But I didn't mind replaying the goals in my brain, and I would often, after a game, go home and journal them as to how they went in and what I thought I could have done, or if it was just a really great goal. But I really tried to separate that from the actual game. So in the game, not deconstructing it. In the game, simply moving on to the next puck and wanting that next puck and wanting that next shot. Finding it difficult when I got into bigger games and bigger situations where there was jumbotrons and replays, especially in away barns where they are then cheering again for the goal that was just scored on you. But trying to stay focused and, you know, knowing that I could stop that next puck and staying mentally resilient in that moment. But I did find a time or place for the breakdown and what I could have done differently or what I thought other goalies might have done in that situation. So goalies are people too. We do have emotions.
So I want to mention the idea of video. I just talked to a young female coach of the U15 team, and her feedback.
Wally, sorry, just to stop. I'm just use the word woman or girls. I'm just reminding you.
Okay.
Instead of female.
Women's team.
Yes, perfect. Or girls team. Girls works too.
Okay. The girls, the head coach of the girls team, and we're talking about use of video. And I've had a task in mind that I wish I was still coaching that I would do, and it totally falls in line with what we're talking about. I mentioned to her to share a clip with the whole team of a goal you scored, making sure you covered 10 seconds of how it occurred from one end to the other or the neutral zone to the net, and have every player break it down and send in what they loved, what went well, what people did in that sequence. Celebrate it. And you know what you're going to know what they see and what they appreciate. They're going to see it and feel good. And they share it with one another. Now, send the clip back this time the next day. Have them talk about what did the other team not do well. So you're pointing out the mistakes of the other team, which everybody makes. But you're not pointing out your mistakes. And I feel that there's a positive reinforcement there. There's a learning element from the mistakes of the other team, which admittedly we all make. All players make them. We're human. So you learn from your mistakes, and you're going to learn from their mistakes. Sammy, you were strong enough, not like that goalie that Saul talked about. He only wanted to look at saves, but the fact that you looked at them.
I think Saul said that he liked both.
No, he didn't say only one. First of all, the guy's goaling in the NHL. He's a good goalie.
Yeah.
And he's a Swedish national goalie. And he just said, I like to watch the saves. He didn't say he didn't watch the goals.
It's a good reminder for all coaches, though, to not just show your team's goals scored, to also include some goalie saves in there to make the goalie feel good about themselves too.
Yeah. Well, one of the most important, like we're talking just specifically about goalies for the moment, and I was a goalie too, so that's goalies definitely are people.
Goalies are people too. I like it.
Yeah, but we can talk about the technical aspects of being a goalie. But I think no other position, maybe in sport, has more pressure than being a goalie in ice hockey. Soccer goalies have tremendous pressure, but they get far fewer shots than the ice hockey goalie. And if a forward is not aggressive on the forecheck, the coach will see it. Fans may or may not see it. If a D-man is not gapping up, again, the coach will see it. Maybe they create a chance out of it. Some fans might see it. If the goalie does something wrong, the whole world sees it. Everybody's got an opinion on it. And so the goalies really have to master managing managing their emotions. And the stuff you were talking about before, the tension release stuff, the breathing stuff, these are really important things, I think, for goalies to work with. And Jacques Plante had one of the great sayings where he said, can you imagine a job where every time you make a mistake, a red light goes on and 15,000 people stand up and cheer? He said, that's pressure. So it's being able, not just having the technical mastery, you have to be able to manage the emotions that go with it. And you have to love the game and love the challenge and love the whole experience. And then it's really the great antidote to anxiety.
We've got Rick Puttock on. Now, Rick is coaching junior hockey in rural Alberta, and he's a longtime member. Rick, I wonder how much you've heard and whether you can share some of your thoughts on what we're talking about. We've been all over the place here, and with Saul on, just a great opportunity to share thoughts and ideas in your environment, junior players who aren't able to make junior teams and they're coming to your team. I wonder what you could take away from this or share from this and add to this. Go ahead.
Actually, I've just tuned in just briefly here, Wally. We're out of the country on holidays, but so I haven't caught a lot of the conversation. So maybe I'll just listen in for a little bit here and maybe offer something later.
Okay. Saul, he's coaching a junior team. Like there are major junior hockey, then there's junior A hockey, and then there's junior B hockey, but there's a level above junior B. They're aspiring to be junior A that they want to get scholarships. So it's that group of young men, 17 to 19 years old or 20 years old, who really haven't made it yet, done well enough to be recognized yet, that still have the motivation and drive and belief in themselves to get there. Whether they want to pay the price or not, or they're open-minded enough or not, it's sort of up to them. But it's a unique environment to coach in, and no better guy than Rick to be dealing with that. Saul, is anybody else? I wanted to talk about your latest book, but is there anybody else with anything hockey related at any level related to what Saul said? Because Saul, it's pretty simple what we're talking about. If you feel good, you're going to play well.
Play better.
And it's that simple. And I have a little exercise that the sheet that I share with and coaches to do once a year and write out their responses to what bothered them, what was their physical symptom, change it to a learning experience. What did you learn from that mistake? And then come up with a cue word. And that worked for me. And I picked it up working with the national part of the National Olympic Women's Program. Sammy, your hand's up. Go ahead.
I have a question about fear because I know that that's what we're here to talk about. When a athlete, I guess any age, has that parent or has that coach that is like that, and that is not the thing that can be changed. How do you work with that athlete to deal with maybe the parent that is, extra crazy on the way home or yelling, or the coach that is all over them? What are your suggestions for athletes that have that in their lives?
Let's talk a little bit about the coach first, because it's a more difficult situation if they're living at home and getting this constantly at home. But if it's, I have a thing, my approach is right focus, right feeling, and right attitude. Under right attitude, I ask them, how they define commitment. And they say, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to achieve my goal. Okay. If you're truly committed, whatever comes up, you have to use it. If you don't use it, it can use you. Okay, so I have a coach who's yelling at me all the time. Negative feedback. How can I use it? I said, then you have to be much more assertive about doing the breathing work to feel good, much more assertive about talking to yourself in a positive way, because you're not getting it from the coach. And either you use it or it'll use you. It'll end up bringing your energy down. It's not ideal, but that's about as good as it can get. I mean, in some cases you could talk to the coach. I mean, little kids are not going to do this. And, you could say, I might even do better if you once gave me a little love once in a while, but that's not going to really happen. So I try and explain. I had a gymnast one time who was coached by a Russian coach, and she was, Canadian level gymnast, and she was getting a tremendous amount of negative feedback. She came in with her mother, who had been a world-class gymnast. How do we deal with this? And the only thing I could say, well, two things. The reason the coach is on you is because he knows you can. That's maybe understanding that helps to deal a little bit with it. But you have got to talk to yourself in a positive way. You have got to really work harder on creating that good feeling within. When it's with parents, it's really a problem because it's really insidious. It's there all the time. And I had one situation where a very, very good hockey player, a young guy who's playing in the Western Hockey League, he's been drafted, a good player. His dad was his coach. And the player, when talking with me, was saying, it's like I'm getting coached all the time. And so I said to him, look, he's 19, now he's 19, he was 18 at the time. I said, you're not a little kid anymore. I want you to say to your dad, look, I love that you're my coach, but when we're at home, I want you to be my dad. And sometimes, parents just forget this. But so my thing you have to use it. If the goal is to be a better player, a healthier person, and you're getting negative stuff, you've got to use it to make yourself stronger, to talk to yourself in a different way. If you have enough self-assurance, maybe you do say something to the coach, Maybe I had it with soccer, with kids soccer, where one coach was yelling all the time, and I had the parent videotape the coach because I didn't think the coach was aware of how they were behaving in the game. And that's something you can do in soccer where the parents are on the sideline. You can't do the same thing in hockey, or not really. So, that was one suggestion, Sammy.
No, I love that. That's incredibly helpful. And I feel like for the where these videos go, where Wally sends them, I think incredibly valuable for a lot of either coaches or athletes that will watch that out there too, that think, I have this fear and I know why, but I don't know what to do about it.
Yeah, well, I think, you have to learn to love yourself in a difficult situation. And it's if it's really intense, we used to say, if somebody falls off the horse, put them back on the horse. But that's only true if they're not terrified. The extent of the fear, is if they're very, very frightened, then we take them off the horse and we give them some support. If they're moderately to minorly frightened, we put them back on the horse. And so the situation there is if the coach is really over the top, take them out of the situation. It's just not worth it. But if it's just, somebody who's repeatedly being negative and unpleasant, then you got to become stronger. You can deal with this. You're a strong person. You're a good person. You're a good player. Take a breath, say positive things to yourself. Yeah.
That's great insight. I think this generation of players can really change our culture. So if some of them can just get through, just use it to get through, to become those coaches and those role models and those mentors. I think that where there's a big shift going on right now in hockey, and we won't have as many of those coaches or parents, hopefully, in the future.
I asked Ken Hitchcock what makes a winning team. And he said to me, you can win. He said, it's the players in the room. You can win. You need a strong core group. A strong core group, you can win even in spite of the coach. So that's another thing. If you have a coach who's very negative and you have a core group that forms almost around in response to that, they can go to the coach, not one person, and say, Coach, we're getting a lot of negative stuff from some of the players, feel that you're too negative. And I think that helps sometimes if you have that group within the team, they can talk to a coach. But it's a tough situation.
No, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. I had one situation I actually wrote about. It's a little different. There was a guy who was playing in the NHL, and he got traded to this team, and the coach was on him all the time, and he couldn't stand the coach. And he said to me, when he was in the room, I had to look away. I couldn't even look at the coach. And he was invited, this player was invited to give a talk at a summer camp. It was a Christian summer camp. And he gave the talk, and the parents and kids were there. And afterwards, one of the mothers came up to him and she said, I don't know you. They had asked him how he got along with his coach. And he said, well, I have some issues. And he skipped over it. And she said, I don't really know you, but I think you have a real problem with your coach. And I think you should pray for him. And he thought, oh my God, pray for this guy. I can't stand him. But, over the summer, every day he said a prayer for the coach. He did it. He was a Christian-inspired guy. And he said by the time he came back in the late summer, the beginning of the fall, he didn't have a bad feeling about the coach. And again, the coach didn't, put him on the fourth line and whatever. But guys were injured and everything else, and he worked his way up. And by the end of the season, he was one of the leading scorers in the NHL. And this guy went on to become the team captain and become a great player in the NHL. So I was working with this Bantam team in Kelowna, and they had a wonderful coach. He had played himself and knew the game. And he would fly me up from Vancouver to talk to his kids. He was really devoted to this thing. And he called me up one time and he said, Saul, I have a couple of parents that are they're destroying my pleasure in the game. They are on me about their kid getting more ice and on the power play and on this and on that. And I'm going to quit coaching. And I told him the story. I said, maybe you should pray for the guy. And he said, pray for that son of a bitch. There's no way I'd pray for him. And he ended up quitting coaching. But it's tough. It's tough dealing with parents who really think their kids are the greatest players and should have all the opportunity, and it's all about their kid and their kid and their kid. And you as a coach are trying to create an environment where we're a team and build up the confidence the kids have and learn their skills and everything. And you have people almost unconsciously pulling things down, pulling it in the wrong direction. Yeah. Anyway, it's just a story, but it's a good story. There are a lot of stories.
Ray?
I'd like to build on Saul's story. because it's so appropriate. One of the things that I'm working on right now, Saul, is heart-centered leadership and heart-centered coaching. And one of the pillars that allows that is gratitude. Praying for somebody is a form of gratitude for that person. And maybe it won't change the person, but it'll change your perspective and how you see that person. And now I refer to my book, I've talked about paradigm shifts. And that's, like I've worked with NHL players too. And the paradigm shift that they go through when you help them see that it doesn't matter what the coach does, it's what you do in the dressing room, on the bench, and when you're on the ice that makes a difference. And when you start thinking that way, I have had the same experience that you've had, Saul. Working with an NHL player that was like relegated to lower line and duties and stuff like that. And when I worked with him, he was moved up to the first line and almost toward every game. And even the commentators were asking other players on the team, what's happening to this guy? Well, nobody knew, but I knew that he had found himself because, like way back when he was a junior, he was one of the top guys in Canada.
So can you talk about finding yourself and like loving yourself? That's basically what the guy had to do. He's so caught up and mired in the muck and distracted. And as Ray mentioned, he got to the point where he believed in himself. And
well, he was a very good player. And, the coach was being a bit abusive and verbally. And, he was not used to that kind of behavior. And so that's why I say he developed this negative feeling. He couldn't look at the coach and so on. And maybe the prayer, as Ray said, maybe it helped him change himself, didn't change the coach. And he was just circumstance. Guys got injured. He got more opportunity. And, you really saw that he was a very talented player. He had the ability. So it wasn't so much anything really I did. He was telling me this after the fact. He was telling me this when he had become an elite player. Just a story, in our relationship. But it's the same, it's the same in every sport. If people feel good about themselves, if people love the challenge that the sport represents, they're going to perform better.
I've got a question to ask that's really dominant in Calgary right now. We picked up the guy that set an all-time NHL record for assists 2 years ago. He dropped 65 points last year. He hasn't even got a point in the last 9 games. And he looks like he can't even play. And I remember watching him play for Florida, and he was just wonderful to watch, creative. And so obviously, I don't think he's lost all his skill. There's something going on in between the ears. And how would you go about trying to help this guy?
Well, absolutely. I've thought of it too. I reached out to some people in the organization and said I could work with him. But how you do it is just what we've been talking about. His love of the game is being challenged by, just not being able to create the opportunities he had before. Maybe, I don't know the chemistry with the line he was on when he was in with the Panthers. But I saw him score a goal, I guess it was a couple of weeks ago, and he kind of looked up to the sky afterwards, like, thank God, So it's like he's playing with a weight on his shoulders, and I'm sure he's very conscious of what he's not achieving for his $10 million 10-year contract, or with terrible contract. But
what I said to my son is, if I was with the Flames, I would put the nets up to the ringette lines, have 3-on-3 hockey, and have the guy play about 3 days in a row with other guys that are struggling, and just play and have the puck on his stick and make plays. And because I remember playing college and I played for a living one year, and I couldn't wait to get back home for Christmas when I could play shinny and actually carry the puck. Because, drills are generally terrible for you get the puck in a breakout play, you pass and you follow the play, and, then you wait in line, and it's practices, especially drill practices, are the worst thing in the world for anybody that wants to be creative or anything. So that's what my solution would be, but it's not a mental thing.
Well, I think there's 2 or 3 things. I think that's a really good suggestion. And I think along with creating some situations where he could play and have some success and enjoyment, along with that, there's the internal work of getting him, what Wally was saying before, getting him to doing some real tension release stuff, some breathing stuff where he's working on creating a better feeling within. So, and it's having him do Ray was talking about doing the visualization. It's becoming the cheetah, the tiger, the panther. It's all of these elements going together. The guy needs some work because he's struggling right now. Now, he may work his way out of it. He may score a couple of goals and start feeling better. He may. But I think there's some things you can do. And if you can create some drills. I remember I worked years and years ago with St. Louis briefly. Keenan was the coach. Mike could be hard on guys, but we had a veteran team. We had, that's when Gretzky was there. We had, Howard Chuck. We had, oh my God, they had a whole bunch of really good players, I think. And one, Mike thought the guys were a little tired. And so one day in practice, he said, okay, today, put everybody on the ice, 2 teams, and you had to be on your wrong side. If you were a right-handed shot, you had to be handling the puck left-handed. And he had 2 or 3 pucks on the ice at the same time. And they had this crazy game that these guys were playing, and they were laughing and having fun. And it was just a shift, just to get guys to have some fun. And there are different ways to do that. So, looking at what could we do to get him back into a groove where he's, enjoying handling the puck and moving pucks around. I think that's using some good coaching insight and also some internal stuff to get him back to having a good feeling and having positive thoughts about himself. Maybe have him watch some video of highlights from when he was playing really well. That's who you are, and showing him that. I had one guy when I used to work with the Los Angeles Rams, and we had one of the linebackers came to see me, and he was a lion, pick an animal, he was a lion, and he made a video of lions hunting and him playing, and lions hunting and him playing, and just these tricks to just create a different feeling. But work should be done. There should be a real investment in transforming this guy who is obviously a talent. You don't lose that much in that short a time. Yeah.
If I can share a story, it was back in 2004. I worked with a pro football quarterback, and he was on his way out. They had figured that there was no way to get him to play properly. He had all the skills in the world, but he had problems between his ears. I worked with him for a week. I have a program that helps people transform themselves. And from then on, it took about, I'd say, a month and a half, but he got into it. And the history demonstrates he won the Grey Cup 3 times after that and retired with the second best records in the CFL. And it was all about changing his mindset and how he saw himself.
So when every team, like I know the Flames have a sports psychologist. I was going to phone him yesterday because he was a football player at the University of Calgary and played with my son-in-law on the same football team. And so good friends of my daughter's family. I know him socially, and he is the sports psychologist for the Flames. And when you get working with a team, I'm curious about the open-mindedness to share ideas with one another. I'm reading a book on hidden potential right now by, I'm not sure, Adam, well, I don't have the last name, but it is brilliant. And it doesn't talk hockey. It talks life and the way of learning and influencing and scaffolding in terms of bringing ideas together and listening to other people, and sometimes better ideas come from somebody lower in the hierarchy than the person at the top or the sports psychologist. So right now the problem is obviously an organizational one in terms of being able to appreciate what needs to be done and being able to do the right thing. And it's a process, a complex process, but the more that an organization can engage its members at every level in an authentic way to share their ideas, the more likely they're going to come up with a solution. But right now, everything is sort of linear, hierarchical, and top down. And I think that whether it's leadership or the situations we're talking about, that's a problem. Leadership is a problem that interferes with the work you doing. You just can't. You'd love to get your hands on that player and know you can help him, and I know you could, but how does your kind of thinking get into that organization so that they call upon you or at least share your ideas with their side? Because no player should be underperforming to that degree. I can't imagine the feeling state that he would be in coming to the rink every day with more than a piano on his back.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the everything has a front and a back. Everything has a front and a back. And one of the backs of having the contract that he has, which would seem to be wonderful, is that there's an expectation to perform at a remarkable level. And that's a pressure. And again, if we look at this and we say, with too much pressure, performance drops off, and we have to be able to deal with that pressure. I know one player who I've worked with took less money a couple of years ago. He's an older player, and he didn't want to, I mean, we're talking a couple of $1 million, but he didn't want to ask for more because it would be an extra pressure on him. He was a sensitive guy. He's fine. I know how his agent felt about that, but that's another story. But you were going to mention the golf book.
Oh, yes. And
I wrote a book recently called Winning Golf, The Mental Game. And I think it's interesting. For years and years, people were saying to me, write a book about golf, write a book about golf. And so I did. And it deals again with right focus, right feeling, and right attitude. And one of the things that's interesting in the book was I have one chapter where I talk about transferring skills. And I took 5 players, 3 NHL guys and 2 NFL guys. And these were players that I had worked with for a number of years, not just 1 or 2 sessions. And I asked them how the work that we did when they were playing hockey has helped. These are all keen golfers, have helped their golf game. And one of them is an occasional shark, and Morris Lukowich. And the hockey players had some really interesting things to say in different ways about how the stuff we did, because it was right focus, talking to yourself in a certain way, seeing the shot you want to make, doing the visualization, creating the right feeling so that energy is just flowing through you. As I tell them, the ball has no energy of its own. It gets its energy from you. And so if you really get in touch and have good energy flow, the ball will go more where you want it to go. And Morris had some really, I thought, clever things to say about that. And Cliff Ronning had an interesting comment. He said, it's much easier playing hockey than playing golf, because if you get pissed off in hockey, you can go cross-check somebody, and you just can't do that in golf. So anyway, I brought it up because so many hockey players are golfers. I guess because in the summer you're off and you have a chance to get on the golf course. And so if you're any of you are golfers, I highly recommend the book, Winning Golf, The Mental Game. Yeah, it's hockey tough for golfers.
So I have to tell you the story of Morris and I were at a Hockey Canada fundraising golf tournament.
Oh, yeah.
And Morris, of course, was playing. I was just riding the cart, riding with him and riding with different people, just hobnobbing with corporate people who were traveling with athletes and golfing with them. And it was the day was finished before going in for supper, and Morris was working on his drive towards this hole, and I was with him while he was doing it. And I said to him, you know, I'm not a golfer. I never I played hockey, but I didn't really golf. And Morris is a very perfectionist, high achiever. He was working on his swing, and he was frustrated, but working on his swing. And I just told him to do. I'll give you an idea. I said, I want you to think of your favorite coach ever. And we talked about, and you know who he was, Pat Quinn. So he talked about Pat Quinn. And I said, just close your eyes, think about him and how you feel about him. And I said, now go ahead and drive the ball. Bang. So he just changed his mindset. Absolutely. He wasn't doing anything else, just changed his mindset.
I think it's a really good technique, Wally. I mean, it's really good insight on your part. Just get him to think about something, you know, something inspiring, somebody who helped bring out the best in him or whatever. You know, you could, yeah, absolutely. It's a very simple, clever technique. And you just see how changing your feelings, changing your focus makes a difference.
You know, Saul, I have to share this story. Years ago, I was in Japan and I was observing the pro teams getting prepared for the Nagano Olympics. And it just happened that the two, Willie Desjardins and the coach of the other team, oh gosh, from University of Alberta were playing in the final.
Billy Moore's.
Yes, Billy Moore's. And they beat out OG, who are the Montreal Canadiens, the Russian coach team of the Japanese league. And each team had 2 or 3 Japanese Canadians on the team. And they got to the final game, and I went to Billy Moore's team's meeting after the final game. And he pulled a rabbit out of the hat. It was a Claire Drake idea, where he asked the players to think of the favorite person in their life that influenced their life and talk about them. And it came to Steve Jajura, who I think was the captain on the team, and he broke down in tears talking about his mother. And they dedicated their final game to that person and put their names on tape on the hockey sticks. And of course, they won. It was almost like too good to be true. Well, I returned to Canada and just happened in on the 6th game of a playoff game with the Calgary Canucks Junior A team. And they lost that game, so they had to play a 7th. And I'm sitting in the stands with Dave King's son, who played with the other team in the city. And he said, I played against the Canucks all year. He said, they're a better team. I didn't know. I thought, okay, they lost it. And so I said, I'm going to go down and see my friend Don Phelps, who had coached the team. And I shared the Billy Moore story with him. He went into the dressing room, did the same thing. They put names on their sticks, and dedicated that game and the rest of the season to it. They ended up winning the national championship. So the distraction and focus on somebody you love overrode the tension, the anxiety of winning or losing, because you dedicate yourself to love of the game,
And
love your family. It's quite simple.
It's a great story, and the dedication of love, but it's getting yourself out of a mindset that's limiting. And there's a number of ways to do it. Morris Lukowich, when Morris was coaching the Calgary Rads in the North American Roller Hockey League, they had played the Vancouver team twice during the season, and they had lost badly. I think the goal differential was something like, 26-9 or something. They were badly beaten. And the way it worked out was that the Calgary Rads had to play the Vancouver team in the playoffs, a single knockout game in Vancouver. And Morris called me up and he said, Saul, the guys just don't believe we can win the game. Is there anything you can, do to give us a hand? So I said, sure. So I came down to the hotel and I spent some time with the guys. I said, it's just one game. They may have a better team. First of all, they were coached by Tiger Williams, which was another thing. They may have a better team, but this is one game. And in one game, we can do anything. And I got into this whole thing about pick an animal, that mindset. And I said, if we became like a pack of wolves, if we truly became like a pack of wolves and we were hunting in the O zone, we were really aggressive, and we were hunting in the D zone, and we were playing like it's our puck, and that line comes off and the next line comes on and they're hunting I said, if we truly are like that, we can beat these guys. And they went out there and they beat them. They knocked them out of the playoffs. And that after the game, we went to this very upscale restaurant in Vancouver, and the guys came in the restaurant and they were howling howling like wolves. And of course, people got a big kick out of it. But yeah, it's getting people out of the mind that limits you. And I think if you can do it with love, love is a core source. Fear is the great limiter, where we started this conversation. And I have one other story I've got to share with you. You mentioned Willie Desjardins, who I had the pleasure of working with for 6 years in Medicine Hat. And we won the Western Hockey League championship. And we were playing in the Memorial Cup. And we were playing the Vancouver Giants in the final game. And we had played the Giants for the Western Hockey League championship. It went to game 7, double overtime, and we won the game. And then because they were hosting the Memorial Cup, we had to play them again. We played them in the preliminary round and we beat them. And then unbelievably, we go to the finals and we're playing them again. And we lost the game. They had Milan Lucic. We had Derek Dorsett. There were, it was all these stuff going on. It was a really good game, and we lost. And our guys were devastated. Guys were crying in the dressing room after the game. It was really upset. And Gordie Howe, who had been one of the owners of the Giants, came into our dressing room. And Gordie said to the boys, he said, "Look, guys, I want to tell you something. I thought you guys played great. You're a really, really great team. You should be so proud of yourselves for, winning the championship, coming here, being finalists. You guys really did a great job." And he went around, shook it. He said, "I played for over 40 years and we only won 3 times, He said, "You should be very proud." He shook a few hands and then he left. And a couple of the guys said, "Who was that old guy?"
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It's just like us old guys here. Who are these old guys? Well, it's a great way, a concluding story to our session, Saul.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you coming on. I'll welcome you coming on anytime. And when you're on, like Ray, who's been a guest before, whatever the topic, I will ask leading questions to bring you in, to bring your expertise to the topic that we are referring to. I'm going to promote your book, cut this up into, I imagine, about 6 to 8 or 10 pieces, and send it out to, I've got an audience of 600, and I asked them to pay it forward. In other words, send it to somebody who might appreciate it and use it, and encourage them to pay it forward. And my mantra is the good of the game, the perspective of the game and what sports can do. That's sort of been I've dedicated my life to that. Both you and I have lost our partners, and I think life has taken on more of a simpler meaning and given us a perspective that very few people have. And so dedicating your talk to the good of the game and thanking you and thanking everybody that came on today. I want you all to have a Merry Christmas. Tomorrow, I think, is my 78th birthday. So I made it another year, and we're hoping for a few more, that's for sure. So have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy
Take care.
birthday, Merry Christmas.
Okay, bye-bye, everyone.
Come over to Henry Viney tonight, Wally, at 4.
I'll write it down. I think I will. Just come and say hello.
Well, I agree with the girls. We'll kind of practice for 45, and then they're gonna put on some Christmas hats and stuff like this, and they'll scrimmage for 45.
Okay. I see Hal Terse. Is that Hal?
Yeah, how are you doing, Hal?
Hi, guys.
Where are you?
I've been on my phone all day. I've been listening the whole time, but it was a great session. Thanks, all. Awesome stuff. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Okay, take care.
Yep, we'll see you soon. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. See you tonight, Tom.
All right, see you, Wally.
Bye-bye.